John Ryan, thank you very much for agreeing to talk with us.
No bother at all, Keith.
I suppose as a jumping off point, what's the history of the shop here at the moment?
Well, I'm here in this particular premises for the last 20 years. I moved up off the quay in 1995. We had a shoe repair business on the quay in 95 as well, and we were in O'Connell Street prior to that. And we left O'Connell Street in 79 and went to the quay, but before that my father started off doing the shoe repairs possibly 80 years ago. And he was about 13 or 14 years of age, and he got a start in a shop called Codd's in Waterford, which everyone from Waterford would have bought shoes in Codd's over 100 years. I think they closed down in the late 80s, early 90s. But as I said, he started off there, and he was indentured to Codd's for 7 years, which meant they practically owned it. And some of the rules involved in being indentured at that time was that you couldn't be out after 7:30 at night, you couldn't visit alehouses or go with women. So he was working away there, I believe, and he was quite happy, and he became sick, and the sickness he got was TB. So he was sent to Newcastle in County Dublin to Peamount Hospital, which was a sanatorium for people that had consumption, or TB as it was better known. He spent 6 years in Peamount with TB, and while he was there he was doing the shoe repairs and teaching the inmates to make leather wallets, purses and belts, and it was kind of an occupational therapy. Some of the people that he repaired the shoes for were famous people. Dr. Patrick Hillary, who went on to be the President of Ireland, was a house doctor there, and Dr. Mark Clinton, who became a Minister for Agriculture, I believe, in a Fine Gael government in the 70s. But while he was there for the 6 years, he wasn't getting much better, and it was coming close, I think, to the time that he would have to have an operation which would involve removing a couple of ribs to take the pressure off of the lungs. But by a stroke of luck, another famous Waterford man who was in the government at the time provided the cure, and that cure was streptomycin, and the man that provided the cure was Dr. Noel Brown, who was born and reared here in Waterford in Barrack Street. So he left Peamount in the 50s and as such was cured, and came back to Waterford, and he was born and reared in Dial Street, and his brothers decided to build him a workshop at the back of the house in Dial Street to repair the shoes for the neighbours, and that's how he started his own shoe repair business in Waterford in the 50s. But unlucky again, he got a relapse with TB, and he had to go into Arkeen Hospital, and he was one of the first patients to go into Arkeen Hospital because that was specifically opened up as a sanatorium for people with TB. So again, he rode his luck out there and recovered, and he went back to doing the shoes in Dial Street, and in the meantime he decided to open up a sweet shop on the quay next to Jordan's pub. So that was in 54, 55, and his sisters ran that for him while he was doing the shoes. So he made up a good business there. He supplied the ships that were leaving for Liverpool with bread, butter, cheese, all the people that were leaving Waterford to find a new life in England. And they'd all leave on the Great Western, which is a famous ship that a lot of Waterford people would remember. So he then decided to leave the quay, and he moved to a shop in O'Connell Street. And while he was there, he employed 4 or 5 men doing the shoe repairs, because at that time everyone was getting shoes repaired, and it was successful. And so then he got the opportunity to buy the Rob Roy pub on the quay in 1961, and that was a well-known public house in Waterford. It catered for the CIE drivers, the train drivers. The dockers would have got paid in there after working the ships. He started off actually paying musicians to come in on a Saturday and Sunday night play a bit of music, guitar, piano, to provide the service for his customers. So that's basically the family, how we got involved in shoes and in different businesses over the years. And I think he actually had a ladies' hairdressing as well over the pub. There was a spare room there, and he was a bit of an entrepreneur. So that's basically it in a nutshell, and I'm still to this day continuing doing the shoe repairs, not in the same vast supply of work as there was before, but making a living, and you'd have to add another few strings to your bow to keep the show on the road, but the door is still open.
And the Hearn and Cahals, do you know any of the history?
Well, Hearn and Cahals were a famous shoe factory in Waterford. I wouldn't know too much of the history about them, but I believe they were in Arundel Square, and in their heyday they probably would have employed maybe 150 to 200 people. I think their slogan was Sure Fit, SURE-FIT, and they were a famous brand of shoes. I believe they closed down in the late 60s, with the vast amount of shoes being imported from China, Taiwan and all these far-flung countries. They just couldn't compete, even though the quality of the shoe that they manufactured would have been top class.
And where your father started off apprenticing or indentering?
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about that?
Well, as I said to you, I think he was 13 or 14. He probably knew someone that knew someone in codes, and said, there's a young lad I know who's looking for a job, and probably Mr. Code said, send him down and we'll see how he'll work out. We'll give him a 6-week trial. Where he worked actually is opposite Penny's. There's a doorway there, and it was a long hallway, and there was 9 or 10 men doing shoe repairs alone just in that long hallway, and it was piecework. So the more work you done, the better your pay, and the quality of their work would have been top class. It was a good trade at the time, because all the shoes were there were no rubber soles, they were all leather, so everything was quality. And men's shoes, the soles on those when they were brought in for repair would have been done by hand, and a man would sit down and stitch them by hand. Would take him, if he was good and quick, he'd do them in 20 minutes, and if he was slow, 35 to 40 minutes. So the more work you got done in the day, the more you got paid.
And do you know what the working conditions were like for him?
Well, listen to my father talking over the years. There were hard working conditions. As I said to you, it was a hallway, so you can imagine a hallway with 9 men working there, and a lot of it would have been done by hand. It wouldn't be heavy machines like what we have today here, and all the stitching would have been done by hand. But it was making a living to keep our family at home, fed and basically watered.
And can you think offhand, I didn't say this to start now, it just popped into my head, any anecdotes your father would have told you, or you would have heard around of different characters around the town or different...
Well, probably getting away from what we're talking about, my grandfather, who was my namesake, John Ryan, he was a blacksmith, and he had a forge down at the side of the Showboat pub in the Glen, and he also had a forge over in Sally Park. And some of the characters that would have come in there would have been a famous character in Waterford that everyone would have heard of. It was Mikey Moore. But a story was told that my father was there at the time with his brother Billy, who was a blacksmith, working with his father John and another brother Johnny, and they were older than my father, and the boss man, the grandfather, was after leaving the forge to do a bit of business someplace, and next thing they decided they tried their strength out on lifting a donkey. So Billy lifted the donkey off the ground without any bother, and I think Johnny lifted it off of the ground. My father went to lift the donkey off the ground. The donkey fell and broke his leg, which meant that farmer, when he came back, had to either get a new donkey or had to be compensated. So basically my father went missing for about 2 or 3 days because he was frightened to go home. after his father had worked for the week for nothing because he had to pay compensation to the farmer for the loss of the donkey. So naturally he didn't try out his strength and lifting donkeys again.
Fantastic, Lido. The hijinks to get up to, like.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's really good now. That's a nice bit of history now in the shoemaking
Yeah.
and that as well. That's quite an interesting
Yeah.
angle, actually.
Yeah.